Before we begin, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and of course, subscribe to the channel with the notification bell on so you don't miss our future stories. Trust me, you'll want to stick around, because today's story isn't just about a plane crash. It's about how something so small, so seemingly insignificant, can end up causing one of the most tragic aviation disasters in modern history. So let's dive in. On the 6th of February 1996, the Dominican Republic witnessed a tragedy that shook not only the Caribbean, but the entire world. Birgenair Flight 301, a Boeing 757-200, went down into the Atlantic Ocean shortly after takeoff from Puerto Plata, killing all 189 people on board. The victims included 176 passengers, mostly German tourists excited about their holiday, and 13 crew members. At first glance, people thought it might have been an engine failure, bad weather, or some kind of terrorist attack. But as the investigation unfolded, the shocking truth emerged. The root cause of this accident was not a bomb, not a storm, not even a mechanical failure. It was a nest built by a tiny insect, the mud dauber wasp. Yes, you heard that right. An insect nest in a part of the plane no bigger than your finger triggered a chain of events that led to hundreds of lives being lost. But before we jump to the insect, let's rewind and understand the sequence of events. The plane in question was a Boeing 757-200, registered as TC Gen, operated jointly by Turkish charter airline Birgenair and Dominican carrier Alas Nacionales. This was a charter flight that was scheduled to go from Puerto Plata in the Dominican Republic to Frankfurt, Germany, with stops in Gander, Canada, and Berlin, Germany. The passengers on this flight were mainly German tourists. They had enjoyed their Caribbean holidays and were preparing for the long journey back home. For many of them, it was supposed to be a night flight. Get on the plane, relax, maybe sleep a bit, and then wake up closer to Europe. But sadly, that never happened. At the controls was Captain Ahmet Erdem, a highly experienced pilot with 24,150 flight hours under his belt. Alongside him was First Officer Akit Gergen, with around 3,500 hours of experience. There was also a relief pilot on the flight deck that night. So by all accounts, this was not an inexperienced crew. They had flown this aircraft type many times before. At around 11:42 p.m. local time, the aircraft was cleared for takeoff. But right before rolling down the runway, Captain Erdem noticed something strange. His airspeed indicator, ASI, a critical instrument that tells the pilot how fast the plane is moving through the air, was acting up. It wasn't showing correct readings. Instead of rejecting the takeoff, which would have been the safer option, the captain decided to proceed. He relied on the first officer's airspeed indicator, which seemed to be working fine. This was mistake number one. As the plane lifted off the runway and climbed, something strange happened. Suddenly, the captain's airspeed indicator started working again, but it was giving false readings. It showed the plane was going at 350 knots, about 650 kilometers per hour. Meanwhile, the first officer's ASI correctly showed the speed to be 200 knots, about 370 kilometers per hour. The autopilot, which was connected to the captain's instruments, started reacting to this wrong data. Believing the aircraft was going too fast, the autopilot raised the nose of the plane and reduced power. This was the worst thing it could have done, because the aircraft was actually flying too slow, not too fast. As the nose lifted and the speed dropped further, the plane entered dangerous territory. The warning system, the stick shaker, which alerts pilots to an impending stall, went off. A stall in aviation doesn't mean the engines stop working. It means the wings don't generate enough lift because the aircraft is too slow to stay in the air. To make matters worse, the cockpit was suddenly filled with contradictory alarms. Overspeed warnings, stall warnings, rudder ratio warnings, they were all blaring at once. Imagine being in a dark room where every fire alarm, burglar alarm, and car alarm is going off at the same time. The confusion can overwhelm even the best of pilots. The first officer and the relief pilot urged the captain to lower the nose and increase speed. But Captain Erdem, convinced by his faulty instrument, believed they were already too fast. He ignored the warnings and the suggestions of his colleagues. Finally, when the engines were pushed to full power, it was too late. With the nose pitched too high, the engines couldn't generate the thrust needed to save the plane. At an altitude of just 4,700 feet, the aircraft stalled and plummeted into the Atlantic Ocean. The crash killed everyone on board. The world was left asking, how could such a thing happen? How could a modern aircraft with such an experienced captain fall victim to something as simple as a wrong speed reading? Investigators soon found the culprit, a blocked pitot tube. The pitot tube is a small but vital device on an aircraft, usually mounted near the nose or on the wings. It measures air pressure to determine the speed of the aircraft. On Flight 301, the captain's pitot tube was blocked. But what blocked it wasn't dirt or debris. It was the nest of a mud dauber wasp, a type of insect common in tropical regions. The plane had been sitting idle at Puerto Plata for about 20 days, and the pitot tubes were left uncovered. During that time, a wasp had built a nest inside one of them. When the plane took off, the blocked pitot tube gave the wrong readings and the chain reaction began. Now you might think, okay, the wasp caused this, but surely a trained flight crew should have recognized the conflicting readings. And you'd be right. The investigation found multiple human errors contributed. The captain should have aborted when he noticed unreliable airspeed. The stick shaker warning was a clear sign the aircraft was stalling, but it was disregarded. Instead of working as a team and analyzing both instruments, the captain dominated the decision-making. At the time, Birgenair pilots had no specific training for unreliable airspeed scenarios. The consequences of this tragedy were far-reaching. Birgenair's reputation collapsed, passenger trust evaporated, and just months later, in October 1996, the airline went bankrupt. Regulators also took action. The FAA ordered airlines operating Boeing 757s to include unreliable airspeed scenarios in simulator training. Boeing itself improved cockpit warning systems so that pilots could better distinguish between genuine and false alarms. Airlines worldwide also reinforced the importance of covering pitot tubes whenever aircraft are parked for extended periods. The crash of Birgenair Flight 301 is often cited in aviation safety training as a classic example of how small oversights can cause massive disasters. A tiny insect nest, a decision not to cancel takeoff, ignoring a critical warning. One by one, these small cracks lined up to create a catastrophic failure, and it reminds us, too, in our own lives. Sometimes it's the little things we ignore that can grow into massive problems if left unchecked. The story of Flight 301 has since been retold in documentaries like Air Crash Investigation, also known as Mayday, and Survival in the Sky. These shows detail the human drama inside the cockpit and help viewers understand the technical details behind the tragedy. So what do we learn from this? That in aviation and in life, vigilance is everything. It's not just about the big things, it's the small details that matter. Because sometimes, a tiny wasp can bring down a giant jetliner, and that's the story of Birgenair Flight 301, a tragedy caused by a combination of nature, human error, and oversight. If you found this story as fascinating and haunting as I did, make sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more incredible real-life stories from aviation history. Also, drop your thoughts in the comments. Did you ever imagine an insect could bring down a Boeing 757?